Morning everyone. I didn't think I'd ever be doing a video talking about the prospect of Jose Mourinho returning to Man United, but last night Mike Keegan wrote an article saying that Mourinho would want that return and that he feels like he's got unfinished business at United. It prompted the big YouTube channels to go with that story, which I'm quite surprised about. I thought it was a non-story really. I think if it had been written by someone else, it would be. And I was really surprised that when they did polls, it was 50-50 in the fan base as to whether they'd want Mourinho to come back or not. So I'm going to give you my perspective on that and then just look at a little bit more about the decision on Rashford and just the whole Rashford situation. Would I take Jose Mourinho back to be the permanent Manchester United manager? Definitely not, based on what I saw the first time and what he's done since. I think his time as an elite manager is gone. He's a short-term manager. When you're trying to build something, I don't think he's the right person to do it. I think it inevitably gets toxic. I think he's in it for himself rather than the club and the team. I remember, and I've been scarred by too much stuff that happened the first time around. And I remember how relieved I was when he got sacked and that Solskjaer came in. And I think the first couple of months under Solskjaer were my favourite time supporting United since Ferguson retired. Probably in part, not just because of the results that Solskjaer got and the way that we played, but how different it was and how different it felt in comparison to Mourinho, and how stifled I felt as a United fan watching United under Mourinho for all but the first 6 or 7 months of the time that he was there, which I thought were really, really promising those first few months. So there's that, and then he's done, obviously he won a trophy with Roma, but let's not forget it was the Conference League, and Roma are a relatively big club, so it's the third wheel of European football. People don't even take the Europa League seriously, and he won the Conference League. In his day, post millennium, he's this millennium, he's one of the greatest managers in football, but his way of playing is so unattractive, is so boring. And my dad and my uncle, when they used to go back in the late 70s and 80s, would tell me about Dave. They told me about Dave Sexton, and I can only I think Mourinho's a much better manager than Dave Sexton. Has won a lot more trophies, but they kind of said, look, he did get United to second place. He did play. He did get us to the latter stages of competitions, but the football was just so bad that no one really warmed to him. Mourinho splits the fan base. I must say, before I move on to the fan base stuff, this isn't happening. He's not coming back to Man United. So it's a non-story, in my opinion. I was surprised to see it 50-50, and I thought, who are the 50% of people that would want him back? Because on social media channels, you rarely have top reds there. So I was thinking, if I was going to guess who the 50% would be, it would be match-going United fans who seem to have quite an affinity with Mourinho. I wouldn't think it'd be the social media United fans, but on YouTube channels, with no disrespect to them, you don't get that many match-going fans that would take part in that type of stuff. So I think there's an element of people just running with the hares and jumping with the hounds. Mourinho coming back, yeah, that sounds all right, because I don't think anyone's really thought it through in terms of what that would look like. The only way I'd take him back is as an interim. So if Ten Hag has a really, really bad couple of weeks now, which could happen, and we are we're mid-table, the season's dead in the league, and the club think, right, we're going to pull the plug, and Mourinho is free, I think for the last few months of the season that could be a great shout, because if we're still in the FA Cup, he could win it. And we've got Bristol City or Nottingham Forest in the next round. He could negotiate that, and then we'd have 3 games. As it stands right now, if we get anyone half decent in the cup, I think we're out. With Mourinho there, because of his ego, I think it'd make it his mission to win that competition, and he could get the team up for it for 4 games, which essentially is what we need to do to win the FA Cup. So if we're that desperate to win the FA Cup, I think he'd be a shout. But it'd have to be with a stipulation that whatever happens here, Jose, at the end of the season, you're going. Like, this has an expiry date. Like Hiddink used to do with Chelsea. They had a good relationship, and he'd be the firefighter who'd come in. And off, I seem to remember anyway, I might be remembering it wrong, but I'm pretty sure Hiddink won a couple of cups as an interim manager, got them into the top four when it was unlikely. And you never know, Mourinho could come in and do that, but it would have to be, this is very, very strictly a short-term thing. The plus points of having him there for an interim period are, I think he's sacked Rashford off. Obviously he's not got the power to sell Rashford, but I don't think he'd play him very often. I don't think he massively fancied him the first time round. And I don't think anyone at United is going to do that now. I don't think anyone's got the gumption to do it at the moment. So I think he would just come in and be like, well, yeah, I'm going to pick the team, and he's not in it. So I think that would be good. I think he'd probably shift Anthony to the left and get the best out of Højlund, because if you look at the type of striker he's had down the years, Højlund probably fits that kind of mould. So that would be good. He'd make us quite difficult to beat probably. And as a short-term thing, I think some of the players, because not a lot of them were there the first time round, would be like, all right, yeah, this is all right. So short-term, there's reasons I'd bring him in, but no way as a long-term manager. Let's move on to the ongoing Marcus Rashford situation. So the club made a statement to say that he'd taken responsibility for his actions, and therefore the matter was closed and he was available for the game against the Wolves. As it turns out now, it's tonight. As the week's gone on, I've thought more and more about the Rashford situation, and I talk a lot about the neglect at Manchester United. The club has been neglectful, and I think this falls into that category, in that I'm thinking, how has it taken this long? Even I've got to look at the fans as well, but let's look at the club really. How has it taken this long for people to start seeing that there's a problem with Marcus Rashford? I'm not being wise after the event. I don't have to justify myself, but it's, so believe it or believe it not, whatever. I've been saying for 4 years, 5 years, his attitude's wrong, to the point where it's pissed me off, to the point where I've looked at him and thought, he doesn't want to be there. It's quite obvious he doesn't want to be there. All the things I've said plenty of times on here, in terms of his demeanour, his attitude, etc. Do we not have a sports psychology department at Old Trafford at United? You know, we're supposed to be one of the leading clubs in the world. I know we're not, but we're supposed to be. And again, this comes back to neglect. Where are the people within that club 4 or 5 years ago saying this could end up being a problem if we don't nip this in the bud about Rashford? Far from that. He's been purposely made into the star boy of the team by the PR department at Old Trafford, and he's become untouchable. He's become a protected species, and he's pretty much undroppable, and he's the highest paid player in the team. How do you look at his body language and come to that conclusion? It's pure neglect of your duty as a club by doing that. We can all have opinions on whether we like players and we don't like players. We can look at a player, and Anthony's a prime example. He'll do things that seem to infuriate people. And to me, who you might think, if you've watched my channel, you think, God, I bet he hates Anthony. I don't hate him. I think the uproar about him is over the top, personally. I'll come back to that in a little while. But one thing I hope we'd all agree on as a fan base is we want players that show positive body language, that run, that are prepared to put the team before themselves, and that their demeanour indicates they want to be there, and that they're hopefully quite humble, and on the pitch at least quite humble, well-rounded people. Surely we all want that. And he's none of those things. So he's the next in a long line. I've said it before. They over-rewarded Pogba and made him a pretty much protected species. Funnily enough, that's probably one of the contributing factors to why Mourinho left. One of them. There was quite a few, but they made this, certainly the media made it a Pogba versus Mourinho thing, like who's the virus kind of stuff. Pogba, again, body language, demeanour, awful. Sancho, Who's done their research on him before they've bought him? £75 million in a summer when we didn't need a winger, and Jude Bellingham would never have come to United, but for that money and the wages, we could have got Jude Bellingham, which would have been a transformative signing. And we signed a player who's been shit in every way. And I would indicate again, if you knew anything about body language, if there is a sports psychology department at United, just look at him. Just look at his body language. Just look at his demeanour. Just look at the facial expressions he pulls. Just look at how he reacts when he got substituted as a young kid at Man City, and how that's evolved over a period of time, and the things that we hear about what he was like at Dortmund. Should we get a player on that amount of money, who by all accounts has a reputation for being quite being late, not sticking to the small details that you need to make successful habits within a football club and a football team? So the culture we've got, is he the right person to bring in it? For the love of God, it's not rocket science. And we didn't need a winger. We needed a centre midfield player. And we still need a centre midfield player. Awful, awful levels of neglect by the club. I'm just going back to Anthony. No, I'm going to come back to that at the end because I don't want to meander too much. Rashford, just to finish the point on Rashford. The club have come out and said, right, the matter's closed. And he's available for selection. I hope that's not the end of it. I hope that behind the scenes, because maybe they don't want to cause a massive shitstorm, they've made that statement, but I hope behind the scenes that Ineos are taking a very, very careful look at this. Because I'm not really that arsed about it as a one-off. He went out in Belfast, got pissed, called in sick. That's not a massive deal. It's not great, but if it was his first misdemeanor, you'd go, okay, he's a lad and he's got a bit carried away and whatever. We've all done it, I think. And he's only human. That's not a sackable offence or anything like that. But it's the list of things that have happened with Rashford, and it's also, for me, his demeanour and his body language and his lack of application on the pitch. It's all that together that means he needs to be looked at. And I hope it is being looked at. So I understand the statement. They're probably trying to quell it hasn't quelled it at all, but quell the storm a little bit. But more needs to be going on behind the scenes there, because he can't be your poster boy moving forward when he's everything that you're trying to root out of the club. Just finally, on just, I suppose, different opinions on players, and it's okay for certain players for people to like certain players, and other people would be absolutely like, how do you like him? He's rubbish, based on technical ability. And Anthony's one that's interesting for me. I touched on it before. He's not great, and he does the same thing all the time. But I would say that's on Ten Hag. Ten Hag knows him from Ajax. He knows what makes him tick. There's a player who, if he's continuing to do the same things and it's not really producing great results, as a coach, you've got to do something about that, and not just drop him because he's a 80. I can't even say it without laughing. An £80 million asset. He's probably like a £30 million asset now, but you've spunked a lot of wages and money on him, so you've got to invest in him. So he doesn't have the demeanour of someone who thinks he's too good to be coached. And if he's too good to be coached, obviously you have to drop him and try and sell him as quickly as possible. I don't know whether he thinks that or not, but I don't get that impression. So I'd say, like, maybe I'm not a coach, but well, I am, but not for that level. Switch him over to the left-hand side. Got a good left foot on him. I don't think his right foot's terrible, by the way. Give a different dimension, or maybe in certain games swap it a little bit. Sometimes on the right, sometimes he goes to the left. Give fullbacks a different problem. Coach him to do it differently, because I think there's a player in there, and at Ajax, and not just in the Dutch league, in the Champions League, he's a really quite an effective player. He plays for Brazil. Brazil aren't what they used to be, but he plays for Brazil. I saw enough last season, where he scored goals. He made goals. I kind of like that he's a little bit of a nasty bastard on the pitch. He's a little bit petulant, But one thing he's got that Rashford certainly doesn't seem to have is energy and a desire to do well, I think. But he's painted out to be this absolute. He's crap. He's one of the worst signings we've ever had. I don't get that personally. He's certainly not one of our best, but it doesn't have to be this almost like pantomime. You're a hero or you're a villain. Sometimes you're just somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it takes a bit of time. And I'm hard on United players. I think I said it before, unapologetically hard on them. But here's a player I think if he's invested in, and if he stays clear of injury and he's coached properly, I think there's a player in there. I think Rashford's a lost cause. Just a date back, and then I'll sign off. I was only little when Danny Wallace signed for United, but I remember Danny Wallace, and I was dead excited about it, and I really loved watching him at Southampton. Albeit it was only a match of the day in those days, but I was super excited about him coming to United. And it didn't work really at United. We could, he was there for a few years. He had quite a lot of injuries, and I think everybody would agree he didn't hit the heights that we thought he was going to hit, and he didn't do the things at United that he did very well at Southampton. There was glimpses of it, but even as a youngster, when I watched him, even at United, I really liked him. And I think I just saw something in him where I thought, this guy's trying everything he can to be a success at United. If anything, he's probably trying too hard. That might have been one of the problems. You can never accuse him of not wanting it to work. And there would be big sections of the fan base that say that Wallace is crap, he's a waste of time, he should have stayed at Southampton. But he came to United, he gave it a go, it didn't work out. He's not on his own. But with Neil Webb, sometimes there's a player that's at with no disrespect, one of the maybe like lower down Premier League team or something like that. They come to United, Maguire's probably another example, and they just can't quite make that step up. And maybe they're not coming into a winning team either, which is hard. I forgive that, and you just move on, that's fine. We can all have different opinions on whether we like or dislike players, but I think surely we're all agreed on the fact that you have to apply yourself, and that's my big bugbear with Rashford, is that he doesn't. And I say this tentatively because I haven't looked at it properly, but I saw something yesterday that apparently Andy Mitten had said on The Athletic, that he knows someone who's close to Rashford who said that he's fallen out of love with the game. And that's what it looks like. And if that's true, he needs to be honest about it. Cantona retired at 31 in the absolute pomp of his career because he'd fallen out of love with the game. And you could see that last season his body language wasn't quite the same. A huge respect for him for doing that. I mentioned George Best the other day for different reasons. He was 26, 27 when his top level career ended, because he knew, I'm not giving what I need to give here, and I'd rather be doing all the other stuff that I want to go and do. So at least he had the integrity to go and do it. Don't just steal a living. But the club have ultimately got to make this decision, and I think the next things that happen with him are going to be really, really important. But I don't see a player there. I don't think there's a way back. I don't think he's going to suddenly turn things around. He could score the odd goal and people go, "Oh, I told you." Now I'm talking about consistent 25 goals, assists, application, giving absolutely everything you've got for the team. And it's been the best part of a year, I think, since we've seen that from him. And that was a short spell from around the World Cup to sort of probably April, maybe March last year. And on that, they gave him the contract he's got now. Comes back to neglecting your duty as a club to look at the whole situation properly. As for Mourinho, not for me, unless it's for a very short term stint. Glazers out.